Have you ever caught yourself thinking, what's the point of all this? Why do I wake up, work, scroll through the news, and go to bed again? That thought can strike in the most ordinary of moments. A cup of coffee, the glow of a laptop screen, and suddenly, in the silence, only one question echoes. Does any of this have meaning? This very question became the heart of existentialist philosophy, not a fashionable Parisian style, as many assume, but a response. To the terrifying news of the 19th and 20th centuries, the world guarantees no meaning, and in that silence is born what philosophers came to call the absurd. Today, I want to show you how Kierkegaard wrestled with Hegel, how Sartre and Camus clashed over freedom, how Schopenhauer and Nietzsche prepared the stage for this drama, and why postmodernism transformed the absurd into a cultural diagnosis. And here's what truly matters. This video isn't about old philosophers. It's about you. It's about me. It's about all of us trying to live in a world where meaning is no longer handed out ready-made. By the end, I'll show you why this still matters, right here, right now, in the 21st century. And I want to hear from you. Share in the comments. What is your stone? What do you keep pushing uphill again and again, in spite of the absurd? Subscribe to the channel. We already have a whole Anatomy of Freedom series, with videos on Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Foucault, all part of a grand philosophical map. Let's build it together. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit the like button, ring the bell. Let the algorithm work for philosophy, not just for cat videos. Existentialism was not born in the cafes of Paris. It was born in the silence of Copenhagen. Its father was Søren Kierkegaard, a man his contemporaries dismissed as an eccentric religious crank. He wrote under a dozen pseudonyms, quarreled constantly with the church, and sold almost no books. And yet, he posed the question that would prove decisive. What does it mean to be oneself in a world ruled by systems? His adversary, philosophically and spiritually, was Hegel. Hegel saw history as a grand unfolding of spirit toward freedom. In his system, everything had its place, from antiquity to the Prussian state. It was the optimism of order. Reason and truth coincide. History works in our favor. Kierkegaard countered, no. History does not save for him. Everything is decided, not in systems, but in the heart of the solitary individual. In his book, The Concept of Anxiety, he wrote, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff. What terrifies you is not the depth itself, but the knowledge that you could leap. Possibility is more frightening than the abyss." For Hegel, freedom was the outcome of rational process. For Kierkegaard, freedom was the source of anxiety, despair, and inner drama. He spoke of the sickness unto death, despair when a person loses themselves, dissolving into the crowd. And here, his challenge feels strikingly modern. Look at social media, millions merging into one endless stream, likes and trends, replacing the inner voice. This is the sickness unto death Kierkegaard warned about, the disappearance of the self into the mass. But he also offered a way out, not system, not politics, but a leap of faith, not blind religiosity, but the courage to be oneself before the absolute. If you'd like to go deeper into this, check out my separate video, Scared to Be Yourself. Kierkegaard knew why. So let me ask you, is anxiety a curse, or is it the sign of freedom? Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with Kierkegaard that it is precisely anxiety that makes us truly alive? At the same time as Kierkegaard, another voice resounded in Germany. Arthur Schopenhauer. They called him the dark philosopher of the 19th century. In an age of optimism, in an age of faith in progress, he declared, "The world is not governed by reason, but by blind will. This will has no goal, no higher meaning. It drives us to live, to desire, to suffer. Life swings like a pendulum, backward and forward, between pain and boredom." That is how Schopenhauer described the human condition in the world as will and representation. Schopenhauer saw escape in the denial of will, in art, where for a moment we are freed from its tyranny, in compassion, which unites us in shared suffering, in asceticism, which extinguishes desire. This was the philosophy of a man who trusted neither progress nor history, a man who saw life as unending affliction. But then, a few decades later, came Friedrich Nietzsche, and he turned this diagnosis on its head. His famous cry, "God is dead," not merely the rejection of religion, but a cultural diagnosis. All the old foundations, faith, morality, tradition, had collapsed. And yet, Nietzsche did not counsel resignation. He issued a challenge: become who you are. His ideal was the Übermensch, the Overman, the one who affirms life, even when it is chaotic, even when it is cruel. The one who creates values, rather than inheriting them. For Schopenhauer, salvation lay in renunciation. Quench the will. For Nietzsche, salvation lay in affirmation. Say yes to life, even in suffering. Their opposition laid the groundwork for 20th century existentialism. Camus read Schopenhauer and agreed, the world is without meaning. But he stood closer to Nietzsche. Live anyway, rebel anyway. And here we see how the drama of philosophy was forged. From Hegel to Kierkegaard, from Schopenhauer to Nietzsche. The thought of the 19th century dismantled the illusions of systems and progress, and left the individual face to face with the abyss. And it was this abyss that the 20th century inherited. If you enjoy exploring philosophy, not as museum history, but as a living drama of ideas, support this video, hit like, and subscribe to the channel. We already have videos on Nietzsche's Death of God and on the philosophy of pain. They continue this line of thought, and to make sure you don't miss new ones, click the bell. Paris, mid-20th century. Café like Les Deux Magots, Le Fleur, Le Dôme. At the tables sit Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus. Two figures who defined the face of philosophy for a generation. Their friendship was explosive. Philosophy broke out of the academy and entered the streets, the newspapers, the theaters of the resistance. Sartre was the rock star of philosophy. All of France knew his name. He wrote plays, novels, treatises. He joined strikes. His credo, existence precedes essence. Human beings are born without a preordained nature. There is no God, no absolute morality, no ready-made instructions. We exist first, and only then decide what we shall be. But this is not freedom as a gift. It is freedom as a sentence. Man is condemned to be free. Even refusal is still a choice. Here Sartre introduced the notion of bad faith, mauvaise foi. A person hides behind their role. I'm just a waiter. I'm only a bureaucrat. That's just how the system works. But Sartre insists this is self-deception. At every moment, you are choosing to continue playing this role or to step beyond it. And here, I want to add my own word because Sartre's thought echoes in other traditions. Hannah Arendt wrote of the banality of evil, The greatest crimes are not committed by monsters, but by people who simply do their job. At his trial, Eichmann repeated, "I was only following orders." And this, Arendt argued, is the horror, when the role itself becomes the justification for evil. Carl Jung warned of something similar. Each of us has a shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress when we cling too tightly to our social mask, to our role. We lose wholeness, and then the shadow returns in destructive forms. Aggression, fanaticism, addiction, Sartre, Arendt, Jung, different traditions, but all converge on one point. A life reduced to a role is dangerous. For Sartre, it is the refusal of freedom. For Arendt, the root of evil. For Jung, the loss of the self. And that is why bad faith is not just an abstract concept. It is a diagnosis of our civilization. Camus, by contrast, was cut from different cloth. He grew up poor in Algeria, played soccer in the streets, worked as a journalist. He once said, "Everything I know about morality, I learned on the soccer field." Camus was closer to life than to systems. His key word, the absurd. The absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world. We ask, why? The world remains silent. Camus saw three possible responses: suicide, admitting life has no meaning; illusion, inventing a justification; religion, utopia, ideology; revolt, to accept the absurd and live anyway. In the myth of Sisyphus, he wrote, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Yes, the stone rolls back down. But in this stubborn defiance, freedom is born." And Camus lived as he wrote. During the war, he edited the underground paper Combat, resisting Nazism. His revolt was not a metaphor. It was a way of life, alliance and rupture. At first, Sartre and Camus were allies. Both rejected illusions. Both lived their philosophy. But soon, their paths diverged. Sartre leaned toward Marxism. For him, human freedom had to be realized in politics, in history, in collective struggle. He believed revolution could bring humanity closer to authentic freedom. Camus saw danger in this. In The Rebel, L'Homme Révolté, he warned, "He who justifies murder in the name of a future paradise destroys the very idea of justice." For Camus, revolt was not about justifying terror. It was about refusing to justify evil in the name of good. Their friendship turned into conflict. For Sartre, Camus was too romantic, too unwilling to fight. For Camus, Sartre had become an ideologue, willing to sacrifice the individual to abstraction. Their break became legendary. It was a clash, not only about freedom and absurdity, but about the very value of the human being in history. Why this is the core of existentialism. Sartre and Camus gave different answers to the same challenge. Sartre, freedom is a heavy burden, demanding action and responsibility. Camus, the absurd is an eternal companion, but within it are born revolt and dignity. And this debate still resonates. When we say the algorithm decided, that is Sartre's bad faith. When we live on, in spite of chaos, tragedy, and memes side by side, that is Camus's revolt. This is why their polemic remains the heart of existentialism. Not a system, not a doctrine, but a living dispute between two thinkers, searching for meaning where none was given. And now, I want to invite you into this discussion. Who speaks to you more? Sartre, with his harsh responsibility and bad faith, or Camus, with his revolt against the absurd? Share your thoughts in the comments. I will read them, and I want to hear your perspective. We often think of the absurd only in terms of the mythical Sisyphus, the stone, the mountain, the endless and meaningless labor. But look around. The absurd is our everyday reality. You open a news feed. The top headlines announce war, the deaths of civilians, catastrophes. Just below, diet tips. Scroll further, a cat meme. All presented in the same font, in the same flow. Tragedy and joke occupy equal space. This is the modern absurd, the nullification of distinctions. The world no longer tells us what matters and what does not. Another example, artificial intelligence creates paintings, music, essays. We marvel, but then we ask, and what about me? Am I the author or just a copy of the algorithm? The boundary between creation and simulation dissolves. Kierkegaard would have called this despair. Camus, the collision of our thirst for meaning with the silence of the world. But our age adds a new dimension. We live in an era of surplus meaning. Too many meanings, each demanding to be taken as truth. So, what do? Some choose escape, unplugging, drowning in entertainment, the endless scroll. Others build illusions. The algorithm knows better. The market will decide for me. Still others attempt revolt, to live consciously, to choose against the grain, to create style, even amid chaos. But as Camus wrote, in the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer. The absurd is not only a dead end, it is an invitation to stare into chaos. And nonetheless, answer with our own yes to life. If these examples of the absurd resonate with you, let me know in the comments. Where do you encounter it most? In the news, at work, online? Let's create a map of the modern absurd together. And of course, subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring how philosophy helps us not to get lost in the chaos. If Camus saw the absurd as a personal experience, the philosophers of the later 20th century went a step further. They showed that the absurd had become the very structure of culture itself. Michel Foucault declared, "Where there is power, there is knowledge." Truth is no longer neutral. It is embedded in mechanisms of control. Hospitals, schools, prisons. They do not simply observe, they produce the normal individual. We think we are free, but our very categories of thought are already formatted. Jacques Derrida revealed, texts are never transparent. Every word refers to another word, and another, and another. Meaning perpetually slips away. This is the ironic form of the absurd. We crave ultimate truth, and yet receive only the endless play of differences. Jean-François Lyotard added, the grand narratives have collapsed. We no longer live in one story of humanity. Instead, there are millions of stories, and each demands recognition. And here, a new paradox emerges. On the one hand, this is liberation. No single dogma, no totalizing system. On the other hand, it erodes our bearings. The individual is lost in an infinite network of meanings. Our 21st century has only deepened this postmodern condition. Social media turns everything into a game of signs. The influencer outweighs the event. The like outweighs the argument. We no longer ask, what happened? We ask, how does it look? This, too, is a form of the absurd, not the silence of the world. As for Camus, today's absurd is that the world screams in thousands of voices, and none of them can claim final authority. But here, postmodernism offers a philosophical tool, not to seek final truth, but to learn, to live within multiplicity. Not as chaos, but as a complex score, where many voices sound at once. Postmodern philosophy is ironic. It knows there is no center, and turns that very insight into its method. As Derrida put it, play is always already going on. If this perspective interests you, check out my video Foucault and Instagram, How Social Media Controls Us Without Force. And if you feel that postmodernism is not chaos for chaos's sake, but a mirror of our age, subscribe to the channel, hit like, and click the bell. It truly helps the channel grow and allows me to create more philosophy videos. Here, we are building a map of ideas, from Kierkegaard's anxiety to Derrida's irony, and every reaction from you keeps this project alive. Existentialism and the absurd are not museum pieces. They remain the language in which we still think about life. Kierkegaard challenged Hegel, anxiety, against the system. Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, shadow and light, the denial of will, and the affirmation of life. Sartre and Camus, the dispute between freedom and absurdity. Postmodernism, the chaos of meanings in which we live. And the central question remains, if the world is silent, what will you say? Share in the comments, what is your stone? What do you continue to push again and again in spite of the absurd? If this speaks to you, subscribe to the channel so we can build this philosophical map together. And be sure to check out the Anatomy of Freedom playlist, where we explore existentialist ideas in even greater depth. Philosophy does not give us ready-made recipes, but it does give us the courage to face chaos and to answer with action.